Jake Humphrey's Platinum Sports Picks, NRL Round 11. That's what's happening on this podcast. Who got on the Dodgers this morning? -1.5. I posted it on the public page. And at 1, nice little winner to start off the day. Now, NRL Round 11. I've got a pretty big card for this in terms of volume of plays. However, the outlay isn't going to be as big as what it normally is, just because I've got a bit of a strange feeling about this round. I think a couple of these games could go either way. I know that's always the case, but looking at these games, some of the lines and the totals are a bit confusing. For me, I feel like I've got quite a strong read on all of the games, but it's looking a little bit too good to be true. Like, I'm looking at these games and thinking, oh, that's a really good line. Oh, that's a really good total. Oh, yeah, I really like this one. And, I'm backing myself. I've got the stakes down there, but it's not one of those, all guns blazing kind of rounds where I think we should unload on everything. I've got the plays. I've got the plays written down, and I'm going to have the plays in the post accompanied with this podcast, and I'm really happy with them. But I just think that we're going to, because we are invested in so many games, we're going to spread out the stakes a little bit more evenly. So we're going to have 1 or 2 stakes on every game, and instead of kind of 3 or 4 stakes on 3 or 4 games, just because I prefer to do it this way this week. I kind of like a play in everything, which is going to be exciting for you guys, and it's going to be a really good weekend of footy. Now, the first game that we have is happening tomorrow night. It's the South Sydney Rabbitohs versus the St George Illawarra Dragons. Now, I like the Rabbitohs in this game. I think that what they did last week against the Eels was very significant in terms of staking their claims as being contenders this season. I don't necessarily mean contenders for the title, because we do know that they're quite a long way away from that. But, the Rabbitohs are always the team that are capable of shocking some of the bigger clubs. They have had a lot of success in the last 5 years. Obviously, they've won a premiership. They've still got a lot of really good players on deck. So I think that by beating the Parramatta Eels the way they did on Thursday night shows us that they're not going to go away, and they're not going to just crumble towards the back end of this season. I think they'll be thereabouts. I think they'll finish 6th, 7th or 8th, something like that. And if you're a team finishing in the top 4, I don't think you want to play Greg Inglis and the South Sydney Rabbitohs in the first week of the finals. Greg Inglis obviously bounced back to form in that game against the Eels, and it was largely due to him being placed closer to the footy. With the article that I've got this podcast accompanied with, I said that Greg Inglis, he's going to get more touches, but he isn't going to have to run as much. And that kind of sounded a little bit strange. But basically what I mean is, with Greg Inglis at fullback, he has to do a lot of movement at the back of the field. He has to, every time he catches the ball, he has to run, 20 or so metres back into the defensive line, which probably takes more of a physical toll on him, kind of slamming himself into these kick chases every time there's an in-play kick. So, he has a lot of touches in fullback, and I think that when he's running the ball back nowadays, he looks a little bit, bored. He doesn't really look like the Greg Inglis of old at fullback, charging the ball back and making defenders miss. He's kind of just, taking the tackle and kind of getting on to the next stage of the game. He's not really looking too dangerous back there. And I think that with him getting the ball in a first or second receiver position, being able to sort of use his ball work more, and even when he's out in the centres, I think him getting the ball out there, as you saw the situation where he was able to pass the ball to Bryson Goodwin on Friday night for that match-winning try, that's a really good position for Greg Inglis in the centres. It's where he's played a lot of his representative footy, and it's where he can get the ball in those one-on-one position with the opposing centres where he's really, really dangerous. And I just think that the spots like 5'8" and centre are better suited for Greg right now, given the way he's looking physically and given, the way I believe he's playing his footy this year. So I think that that's a really good spot for Greg Inglis, and I think that it's going to improve the entire team, him being there. And I think it might kind of spark Greg Inglis a little bit and kind of boost, kickstart his enthusiasm and, give him a bit of newfound excitement for this 2016 campaign. Now, the Dragons, they beat the Raiders on Thursday night. I don't want to talk about how that match went down because obviously it frustrated all of us, but they look pretty good, the Dragons. They've won 3 of their last 4 matches, and they they're just chipping away. They're showing us that you don't need to have a crazy flamboyant attacking style to win matches. You just need to be able to not make too many errors, not concede too many penalties, and stick to your tackles, make your tackles, get the points when they're on offer, and grind out their opponent. And that's what the Dragons have been doing. I did make a statement last week that I think the Dragons will struggle down the stretch against teams who are capable of putting up points, and that's what I thought the Raiders were. But I've since had a bit of a look at the Raiders and thought, well, hang on, maybe the Raiders are going to struggle against these tough defensive teams because they struggled against Parramatta, they struggled against Penrith, they struggled against the Dragons on Thursday, so maybe the Raiders are going to have a little bit of difficulty against these gritty teams. And I think the Dragons right now in 8th position probably feel like they're in a decent spot moving forward. This match here between the Rabbitohs and the Dragons is a match that has been pretty one-sided in the last couple of seasons. The Dragons won earlier this year 8 points to 6, but before that, the Rabbitohs won 4 consecutive games, and I think you'll see them win this one on Thursday night just on the back of a bit of a revamped group of players. I mean, Sam Burgess was absolutely incredible against the Eels on Thursday night, having 20 runs for 220 metres or something along those lines. And against a forward pack like the Dragons that might be lacking a bit of starch, might be lacking a bit of grit, they're missing Joel Thompson, who is a pretty important member of their back row. I think that Sam Burgess is really going to be able to have another good day, or a good night rather, and get a win against a team who not only have they beaten 4 of the last 5 times they played them, but also excluded from that piece of statistic, beat them at the start of this year in the Charity Shield. So it was another win that they got against them. And I think the only reason they did lose to them early in the year, not trying to take too much credit away from the Dragons, but the fact that they played in a monsoon really didn't help their cause there. So I think that the Rabbitohs are going to be able to win this game. What we're going to do is we're going to combine the Rabbitohs head-to-head with the Golden State Warriors head-to-head. I don't really like throwing other sports into the NRL, but I'm so sold on the Golden State Warriors. If you throw a stake on the 2-leg multi there, you'll get about $1.71 odds, and I think that's the play we're going to go with for Thursday night. Now, if the Golden State Warriors do lose on Thursday, then we'll play a stake on the Rabbitohs minus 5.5. I spoke for 7 minutes about that match, so we will move on to the next one. Now, North Queensland Cowboys versus the Brisbane Broncos. This shapes as probably the most exciting game of the weekend, and it's also probably the hardest game of the weekend to predict. The North Queensland Cowboys, who I touted as one of the best teams I'd ever seen last week in the podcast, got exposed a little bit by the Melbourne Storm, who played a tough brand of footy, really disciplined defence, and kind of forced errors out of the Cowboys that we're not normally accustomed to seeing from them. And I think that the Cowboys might be a little bit rattled from that. It might take them a little bit to get over. Also, on the back of them being a little bit mentally rattled, I think they could be a little bit physically rattled too. It was a very tough encounter that they played there on Saturday night. They have a turnaround which is equal to that of the Broncos, 6 days. But the Broncos kind of cruised through their match with Manly. The Cowboys really, I think a few of their players took a few knocks. And I do believe their lineup is relatively unchanged against the Broncos. It is completely unchanged against the Broncos, in fact, but that's not to suggest that a few players, may have come out of that one a little bit worse for wear. Now, looking across at the Broncos lineup, they have several big ins in this one. Broncos, by the way, are about a $2.15 underdog. They've got Adam Blair, Alex Glenn, and Andrew McCulloch coming back into this team. All of those players are going to start, and all of those players have been sorely missed. Now, Brisbane, one interesting thing about the Broncos, they hold a 27-12 record against the Cowboys. Traditionally, when talking about the Brisbane Broncos, they love to step up against the other Queensland teams. They love to step up against the Cowboys. They love to step up against the Titans and kind of show them who's boss of the state. Now, I think that Wayne Bennett would have seen a lot of what the Storm did to the Cowboys on Saturday night. I think he's watched the match once, twice, 3 times. Craig Bellamy set a nice blueprint for what teams need to do if they want to beat the Cowboys, and the Broncos have the defensive structure. They have the players on the offensive side of the ball. I think they kind of just have the personnel from top to bottom to do exactly what the Storm did to the Cowboys. They're not an identical team. Obviously, they don't have the experience in the halves, Cooper Cronk, and in the hooking position, Cameron Smith, but they do have an incredible coach and they do have a very, very good defence. And I think that those are 2 areas where the Storm were able to create an advantage over the Cowboys, coaching and defence, against them on Saturday. And I think the Broncos can go a long way to emulating that. I like the Broncos in this one. It is a tricky game, but one thing I will mention to you about this game is it's part of the in-play Bet365 refund. I've got that all included in the write-up, which will be accompanied with this podcast. So basically, we're going to put ourselves in a position where I want you to put a stake on Brisbane before the game and then a stake on the Cowboys in play. And the worst case scenario would be a small loss on this game if the Cowboys are to win. So that's what we're going to do. I have a slight lean on Brisbane, but by doing the in-play offer with Bet365, it will give us that bit of insurance and kind of put us in a position where we can't really lose too much money. I think the Broncos are good against Queensland teams. I think, obviously, I know they're travelling to a difficult location in North Queensland, but I reckon they're going to be able to give the Cowboys a bit of a shake-up here, who might be a little bit down on confidence and might be a little bit troubled after that loss of the Storm. I don't think we can undersell that loss. Everyone saw it, and I think the Broncos are going to be able to work on what the Storm did. Now, moving on, I've got 19 minutes left. We're going to talk to you guys about the West Tigers and the Newcastle Knights. Now, this match, the Tigers 14th against the Newcastle Knights 16th. Something worth mentioning is that the Knights have won 6 of their last 7 matches against the Tigers, including one this season, which was their solitary win on the year. They beat them 18 points to 16 up in Newcastle. And now the Knights come into this one as an 8.5-point underdog, so the Tigers are pretty favoured, and so they should be. And obviously the Tigers aren't favoured because the Tigers are such an incredible team. They're favoured because the Knights are just falling to pieces. I really feel bad for the Newcastle Knights. They were absolutely crunched by the Sharks 62-0 last week. You know, we saw Dane Gagai brought to tears at the end of the game. Their Indigenous fullback, who I think took a lot of pride in playing during Indigenous round, was really upset that his team weren't even able to put up any kind of a fight against a really strong Cronulla team. This week they're travelling to Campbelltown to play the Tigers. They've got Nathan Ross, Paulie, Sam Mateora, and Trent Hodkinson returning to the team, 2 of which are going to start. In fact, 3 of them are going to start. Sam Mateora, Nathan Ross, and Trent Hodkinson are all going to start, and then Paulie is going to jump onto the bench. So for mine, I think that is a very, very big boost for this Knights team. And then when you look at the Tigers, they're missing Curtis Sirenan and Robbie Farah. Robbie Farah was concussed quite badly against the Bulldogs on the weekend. He'll be missing. And Curtis Sirenan started last week against the Bulldogs and kind of has been, a regular player in their team. And they'll probably, they'll suffer a little bit from him being out of the lineup. Now, this game, I think that the line for the Knights is a nice line. We've got the line here as 8.5. It's the play that we're going to have for this game. It's going to be for 1 stake. And look, I know that I've written something in my article here, and I'll quote it to you guys who are only listening to the podcast. Just let me scroll down to it. It's basically says that sometimes, here, this is where, if you want to look at the form guide for this match, you won't back the Knights. If you want to look at the lineups for this match, you won't back the Knights. If you want to look at ladder positioning for this match, you won't back the Knights. But that's the beauty of betting in sports. Sometimes everything needs to be thrown out the window, and you've got to take a chance with the team who have their backs against the wall. After everything that happened on Sunday, from the Sharks scoring 62 to Dane Gagai being brought to tears at the end of the match, I'm expecting a very motivated Knights team for this one against the Tigers squad, who are missing a couple of players. Take the shackles off, lads. Take a risk. Take the underdog. And I'm standing by that with a full heart. I think that the Knights are going to come in here. They're going to be really, really motivated. Don't forget they were able to beat the Tigers this season, which is going to add to the confidence. Not saying they've got a lot of confidence, but I do think they will back themselves knowing that the Tigers are a far cry from the Cronulla Sharks. They're going to go in there thinking that they're probably a bit more of an even matchup with the Tigers, and also knowing that they beat them early in the year. I think this game is going to be close. And I have put in the article that I have a lean on the under. And the reason I have a lean on the under is because this total has been set so high. And this was the exact total that was set in the corresponding other. The first game between these 2 teams, the exact total that was set of 46.5, and it went under by 12 points. Why are the bookies assuming that the Knights and the Tigers, the Knights who scored 0 points last week, the Tigers who scored 4 points last week, why are they assuming that both of these teams can produce 20 plus points and turn this thing into a shootout? Why are they assuming that? I'm not sure. Obviously, these 2 teams leak points just as frequently. Obviously, these teams leak points more frequently than they score points, which could contribute to either side having more success in attack. But no, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. I like the under as a small lean. Do with that what you please. Now, the next game we have here is the New Zealand Warriors playing host to the Canberra Raiders at Takarangi, which is an alternate home venue for the Warriors. It's not their usual spot of Mount Smart Stadium, but it is somewhere where they'll be comfortable in the North Island of New Zealand. Now, this match here, we have a 39.5 point total. We have the Warriors coming in as a slight favourite, and this one's actually going to have one of my most comfortable bets of the weekend, and I do like the over 39.5 in this one. We saw the Raiders last weekend struggle against the Dragons. We saw the Warriors, that match kind of ebbed and flowed against the Panthers. They looked good in attack at times, but then they just let in points, and they were kind of a little bit all over the shop. They're welcoming back Simon Mannering, who we know, I know, and you will know shortly if you don't already know, is a very important part of their team. Maybe the importance of Simon Mannering is how he leads the team and how he's such a familiar face there and how he's so experienced. He is a good player, he is a good edge runner, he gets a lot of work done, but I think his experience and his leadership is invaluable when you're talking about the Warriors. Now, looking at the Canberra Raiders team, they're relatively unchanged from last week. I think if I could look at this lineup really quickly, it looks as though the Canberra Raiders they have a few changes, which I have listed in my article. Frank Paul-Nu'uassala, Jeff Lima, and Sam Williams are all coming into the team, and Sean Fensom is leaving the team for this week. Now, Frank Paul-Nu'uassala, Jeff Lima, and Sam Williams, all three of these players, I believe, will be on the bench. Sam Williams and Frank Paul-Nu'uassala, 18th and 19th man, while Jeff Lima is the 15th man. So the Raiders last week, the problem wasn't with their personnel, the problem wasn't with injuries, players being unavailable. They were just outplayed by the Dragons and didn't really take the chances when they could. They made a lot of errors, and they kind of reaffirmed my opinion of the Raiders in being a team that are incredibly hard to predict and a team that you really don't know what they're going to do. I thought it was a good matchup for them last weekend against the Dragons. They weren't able to deliver. I think that this weekend is also a good matchup for the Raiders against the Warriors because, I've looked through the Raiders form guide, and for a Raiders team that in the past we've kind of become accustomed to seeing post so many points, they failed to score to over 20 points in 4 of their last 5 games. But I will point out that these failures have come against teams like the Panthers, come against the Eels, come against the Dragons, come against Cronulla, and then when they played a team like the Tigers who do leak a lot of points, they were able to score 60. I think that the Raiders are finally going to be able to get a little bit going on the attacking side of things against a Warriors team that absolutely leaks points. The Warriors this year, they've conceded 262 points, which is third to the Knights and the Tigers. And that is not a good group of teams to be amongst. So the Warriors do not have a good defense at all. And the Raiders' defense has tightened up a little bit as to what it has been in the past. But even in saying that, the Warriors have averaged 28 points in their last 3 home games. So this one, statistically speaking, is shaping up to be a high-scoring game. And I think that we're just due for a Raiders shootout kind of competition because we haven't had one, in quite a long time. I mean, they got thrashed by the Sharks down in Canberra, which went over. They thrashed the Tigers in Canberra, which went over. But, in and around that, we've had a lot of unders matches from the Raiders. It's not something we're accustomed to seeing. And I think the low total of 39.5 here is a good opportunity for us to capitalise on the over and kind of, back both teams to throw the ball around and click into gear from the attacking side of things. I also like the Raiders, a small lean on them, +2, just because the Warriors, they are, even though the Raiders were poor on Friday night, I think the Warriors were worse. I think the Warriors are kind of they're a sinking ship right now. I'm not sure how they're going to turn things around, but they are, a long way away from what we expected them to be this season. Partly due to injuries, but mainly just due to lack of performance, lack of chemistry from the players. I don't know what it is, lack of effort, but there's something happening here. I also have a small lean on Jordan Rapana, the Raiders right winger, who has 9 tries to his name this season to score a try, and you can get him for $2.10 at Bet365. I think those are very, very good odds. Now, the next match we're going to talk about is the Cronulla Sharks playing host to the Manly Sea Eagles, Battle of the Beaches, and that is going to be on Saturday night. The last game for you on Saturday night, and the Sharks come in this one as a $1.30 head-to-head favourite and around about an 8.5 point favourite on the line there. Now, this match, let me just tell you something about this match. The Sharks and the Seagulls, since the beginning of time, have played 87 matches. The Sharks have won 23, the Seagulls have won 62, and they've drawn 2. Manly have won 13 of the past 14 clashes between these two sides, including 7 straight from 2013 onwards. This has developed into one of the most one-sided fixtures on the calendar, with the Seagulls lifting no matter where they might be on the ladder. So as a Sharks fan, I'm so aware of this problem that Manly have, that Cronulla have with Manly rather, and I'm so wary of it heading into this match. And as I just alluded to, it doesn't matter where Manly are on the ladder, they always seem to get in a mood for a match with Cronulla, and I'm expecting the same thing here. The Sharks have such a strong team, they don't have any omissions from last week. Actually, yes, Matt Pryor is missing for this game. He's the only player who's exiting the Sharks lineup, and I shouldn't say that like it's insignificant, because Matt Pryor has had a very good season. However, with Jason Bakuyi coming into the team and David Fafita, I think they should be able to compensate for the loss of Matt Pryor there. Manly, Jamie Buhrer, Josh Starling and Steve Maddai come into the team. 3 big ins. However, Martin Tapau and Tom Simons exit the team. I think Steve Maddai is a very big in for them. Although he is banged up quite regularly, when Steve Maddai is in a rhythm out there in the centres, he is a dangerous proposition for anyone who's coming across from him. And Jamie Buhrer, a very talented player, someone who I believe Laurie Daly and Blues selectors would like to be fit for Origin in the coming seasons. He's back in the team, and I think that, as I said before, it doesn't really matter where Manly are on the ladder. They're going to have a crack against Cronulla, and they're going to trouble them. Now, this match here, I think that it's going to be close. The line for Manly plus 8.5 is about $1.90, right? That's the line, okay? The margin on William Hill, either team to win by 12.5 or less, for me is basically spotting Manly an extra 4 points, because I don't think they're going to be able to beat the Cronulla Sharks 13+. Granted, it is possible. I don't think they will beat the Cronulla Sharks 13+, barring an absolute meltdown from the Sharkies. They were able to beat them by 10 points at Brookvale earlier this season, but this is a different Sharks team we're seeing here. So basically the lean on this game, and that has been expressed through this pick, either team to win by 12.5 or less. I think it's going to be close, and I think Manly are going to keep this one close, very close. My score prediction for this is Cronulla 18, Manly 12, and I think Manly, if they don't win, will certainly keep this one close. Now the next match, running a little bit low on time, it's the 6th match of the weekend, the Penrith Panthers versus the Gold Coast Titans. Penrith Panthers are minus 10.5 point favourite. The Titans, they got a very good win on Monday night against the Roosters. They did exactly what I thought they would do. They're a well-coached team, this Titans outfit. They've got a good forward pack. They're very underrated. They are still underrated. I spoke to Josh, the other bloke who works here, great guy Josh. I spoke to him and he told me that he thinks it's a fishy line, the Titans being plus 10.5. And you know what? I'm not totally opposed to that theory. I think that by releasing a line of minus 10.5 for the Panthers, plus 10.5 for the Titans, is perhaps baiting the public to take the Titans. They're saying, hey, take the Titans, we dare you. We're going to give a line out for the Titans that may be a little bit bigger than what it should be, with the plan in mind for Penrith to blow the Titans off the park. Is that the mindset of the bookies, of the odds makers, or do they genuinely think that the Titans are 10.5 points worse than the Panthers? I can tell you for one, I don't think that for a moment. The Titans are 7-3 against the spread this year, so far. Okay, the Panthers have never had a match settled by more than 12 points. All of their wins earlier in the season were coming by 2s and 4s and 6s and 1s. It didn't matter who they were against. They weren't able to blow anyone off the park. The Titans lost 25-20 to the Cronulla. They lost 24-16 to Brisbane. They beat the Raiders 24-20 in Canberra. The only time they've been blown out this season was when they just crumbled against the Melbourne Storm, but I'm going to call that a one-off. I'm going to call that a bad day at the office. I think that the Titans in this one can make this one very close. I'm going to have one stake on the Titans plus 10.5 and one stake on the margin, but either team to win by 12.5 points or less. And that 12.5 points or less, I'm kind of looking at a plus 12.5 point line for the Titans, because I don't believe they can win by 13+. We're going to have a stake on either one of those, and a lean is under 41.5. So right now I've got 5 minutes left, which is going to shape up as a good amount of time to talk about these last two games relatively quickly. The Canterbury Bulldogs versus the Sydney Roosters. Now, the Roosters were heavily backed by the public on Monday night, and I think a lot of people lost on that game. But, you know, the thing about sports betting is you've got to be able to kind of erase your memory of what happened last week. To some extent, and not get too offended by getting stung by a team. There's a lot of people out there who'll be like, damn it, man, I backed the Roosters on Monday night. I don't want to back them again. They really piss me off. They're annoying. You can't bet like that. You can't bet like that because we know everything is different week to week. I've had a good read on the Roosters when they beat the Rabbitohs earlier in the season. I backed them, okay? And I think that they're going to be able to win this game here. However, I'm not brave enough to take the head-to-head, but I think that the Roosters in Sydney against a team like the Bulldogs, and a team like the Bulldogs who have literally, for me, I think of the Bulldogs. When I think of the Bulldogs, I think of inconsistency. Win-loss, 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 win-loss since round 2. From between rounds 3 to 10, they haven't been able to string together consecutive wins. They haven't strung together, or they haven't lost 2 games in a row, rather. But it's just gone up and down and up and down and up and down. And going off the trend they won last week against the Tigers, they're due for a loss. I'm not going to say that they'll definitely lose this game, but I think the Sydney Roosters, if you look at the way they performed against the Bulldogs in recent times, let me read out the last 4 results between these two teams. Roosters 38-12 in 2015. Roosters 38-12 in 2015. Roosters 38-28 in 2015. Roosters 24-10 in 2015. Roosters 32-12 in 2014. So the last 4 games, the Roosters have won by a minimum of 10 and an average of something that's looking like around 20, 22 points there. So the Roosters certainly like playing against the Bulldogs. And in a matchup where their forwards are probably going to be a little bit ticked off after getting rolled a couple of times by the Titans. I mean, the Titans forward pack played particularly well, and I think the Roosters will have taken exception to what a couple of people have said about the way they played on Monday night. I think they're going to really shape up Jared Warrior, Hargraves, Dylan Napa, Sam Moa, Boyd Cordner. I think the lads are really going to shape up. Blake Ferguson needs a bounce-back performance ahead of a potential Blues spot. I think the Roosters are going to have a really good crack here, and we know the Roosters are capable of having a really good crack against a Bulldogs team who love slipping up when they're expected to win. I like the Roosters in this one, plus 6.5 alternate two-way handicap. And that goes for $1.78. Now, I do believe, something that I haven't included in the article, which I will include now in the write-up, I do believe that this game is part of the Bet365 in-play promotion. So what I think I will do is I'll come up with some kind of method, similar to the Cowboys-Broncos game, and I will post that on the article, and you're going to see it as you read it. So, and that will put us in a position where we're backing an underdog, much like on Friday night. We're backing an underdog, but we're going to give ourselves a bit of an insurance opportunity to kind of not lose any money at all, ideally. Now, the last game, coming up on 2 minutes 30 left, the Parramatta Eels versus the Melbourne Storm. Now, the Eels, they lost, obviously, last week, and I'm not sure how motivated they're going to be to win this match against the Storm. I know for a fact the Storm are going to be a heavy public play. On Bet365, they are now a favourite. They are an underdog in a couple of bookmakers, and I think that is a bit of a trappy line. I don't know, that's a weird line for mine. You would think, given the direction of both teams, that the Storm's going to be an easy win, but there is no such thing as an easy win when it comes to sports handicapping. When it comes to even money bets, when it comes to $1.90s and $1.80s, there's no such thing as easy, because if it was easy, they wouldn't be $1.90 or $2. The bookies normally know more than we do, and I think that they feel this line for this game is quite accurate. And they think that the Eels are a real chance of beating the Storm in this one. For mine, I'm not going to touch it. I know the Storm are such a good team, but I'm not going to touch it because I know the Storm are going to be such a heavy public bet, and I'm really scared to kind of do what I think the bookies want me to do and bet on Melbourne at that convincing that tasty price of $2 rather. I'm really not going to do it. However, I don't think that is the situation in the Titans game, with the Titans being plus 10.5. I think that's legitimately the bookies undervaluing the Titans. However, in this one, I think it could be a little bit of a trap. It's a fishy game. That's all I've got to say about this one. One thing I do know about the Eels and the Storm is they like to play defense. Their last match was 17-8 to the Eels. The last match before that was 14-4. I think both of these teams are going to come out and they're going to mould their games around defence. What they've done for the whole season. The Storm have not conceded more than 20 points all year, and the Eels at Pertex Stadium, after conceding 22 points to the Rabbitohs, after conceding a match-winning try, should be switched on, should come out with a can-do mentality in regards to defence. Brad Arthur and Craig Bellamy, they both like grinding, and I think we're going to see that in this game. We're going to play the under 37.5 total match points for one stake on Sportsbet, but you can get it pretty much wherever else you want. We're coming up on 30 minutes now. I hope you guys have liked the show. I'm going to clean up the article, clean up all the tips. I hope you guys can get your bets on as soon as possible, and I hope we have an outstanding weekend of NRL because you guys deserve it. I'm Jake Humphries. I'll talk to you guys later.